He left me when I was 8 months pregnant. That I still remember that night. It was raining outside, and I was standing at the front door with one hand on my pregnant belly and the other holding the ultrasound picture of our unborn child. That I thought my husband would come home, hold me, and tell me everything was going to be okay. Instead, he walked through the door carrying a suitcase. That I looked at him and smiled. "Where are you going?" He wouldn't look at me. "I'm leaving." I laughed nervously. "Leaving where?" He finally looked at me, and the next words destroyed everything I believed about our marriage. "I don't want this life anymore." I begged him to stay. That I reminded him that our baby would be born in a few weeks. That I asked him how he could abandon his pregnant wife. That he simply picked up his suitcase and walked away. That night, I promised myself I would never need him again, but I didn't know what was waiting for me after he left. That I didn't know that his family had been hiding a terrible secret. That I didn't know that someone had been watching me. And I definitely didn't know why my husband had really walked away. 3 years later, my life had completely changed. That I had my own home, my own business, and the little girl he abandoned had become the most important person in my world. That I thought I had finally escaped the past. Until one evening, someone knocked on my door. That I opened it, and there he was, the man who had left me pregnant, the man who hadn't seen his daughter for 3 years. That he looked broken, his eyes were filled with regret. Then he said 4 words I never expected to hear: "Please take me back." But I didn't know, he hadn't come back because he missed me. He had come back because our daughter was in danger, and the truth I was about to discover would change all 3 of our lives forever. The day my father died, my brother looked me in the eyes and said, "Dad left the house to me." I didn't know what to say. That house wasn't just a property. It was the home where my father had raised us, where Mom had spent her final years, and where my brother and I had grown up. So when Michael showed me a document claiming Dad had left everything to him, I was completely shocked, but I was too heartbroken to fight. The funeral had happened only 2 days earlier. Everyone was still grieving when Michael suddenly called the family together. He placed a folder on the table and said, "Dad made his decision before he died." Inside was a document with signature. According to Michael, the house belonged entirely to him. I looked at the paper carefully. Something about it felt wrong. I asked, "When did Dad sign this?" Michael immediately answered, "A few months before he died." That answer bothered me, because during those months, Dad had been seriously ill, and I remembered something he had told me shortly before going into the hospital. He had handed me a sealed envelope and said, "Daniel, don't open this until you really need to." I had completely forgotten about it. Michael continued talking about the house, but I barely heard him. All I could think about was that envelope. Later that night, I returned to Dad's house. I went straight to his bedroom and opened the drawer where I had kept the envelope. It was still there. My hands were shaking as I opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter from Dad. The first line said, "Daniel, if you're reading this, something has gone terribly wrong." I froze. I continued reading. Dad explained that he had become suspicious of Michael before his death. Michael had been asking questions about the house, Dad's bank accounts, and his important documents. Dad wrote that he had already created a final will with his attorney, and according to that will, Michael was not getting the entire house. The property was supposed to be sold, and the money divided between us. I couldn't believe it. Then I found something else inside the envelope. A small USB drive. A note was attached to it: "Do not confront Michael yet. Take this to my attorney." I stared at the USB drive. For the first time, I realized something. Michael hadn't simply misunderstood Dad's wishes. He might have been lying to the entire family. I picked up my phone and searched for the lawyer's number. But before I could make the call, I heard the front door open. Michael was home. And he was walking toward Dad's bedroom. I quickly hid the letter and USB drive in my pocket. The bedroom door opened. Michael stood there. He looked at me, then he looked at the drawer. And his expression suddenly changed. "Daniel," he said quietly, "what exactly are you doing here?" I didn't answer. Because at that moment, I realized something terrifying. Michael already knew about the envelope. Michael stood in the doorway and stared at me. "What are you doing in Dad's room?" I tried to stay calm. "I came to look for some of Dad's things." He didn't move. Then he asked, "Did you find anything?" That question confirmed my suspicion. Michael knew there was something in that room. I shook my head. "No." He watched me for a few seconds, then walked away. I waited until I heard the front door close. Then I took out the USB drive. The next morning, I contacted Dad Saturday. When I told him Dad had left me a letter and a USB drive, he became completely serious that he asked me to come to his office immediately that I arrived that afternoon. The attorney opened the files on the USB drive. There were several documents. The first was Dad's actual will that it clearly stated that the house was supposed to be sold and the money divided equally between Michael and me. Then the attorney opened another file. It was a video recorded by Dad shortly before he died that I watched my father sitting in his hospital room. He looked weak, but his voice was clear. He said that he had discovered Michael was trying to pressure him into changing the property documents. Dad had refused that. He also explained that he had signed his final will in front of his attorney and witnesses. Then came the biggest surprise. The attorney showed me a scanned copy of the original document. The signature Michael had shown the family looked almost identical. But it wasn't the same document. That it was a fake. That I couldn't believe my brother had gone that far. The attorney told me not to confront him yet. That he said, "Let me handle this legally." I agreed. For the next few days, I said nothing. Michael became more confident that he started telling relatives that the house was officially his. He even began planning renovations. Then he called me. He said, "You should stop fighting this, Daniel. Dad made his choice." I calmly replied, "Maybe you're right." He laughed. "Finally, you're accepting reality." I hung up. What Michael didn't know was that the attorney had already contacted the county records office. Within days, the original will was officially verified. And then the lawyer discovered something even more important. The document Michael had presented wasn't simply different from the real will. The signature had been copied from an older document. The witnesses listed on Michael's version had also denied signing it. That we finally had enough evidence, but I still didn't confront Michael. That I wanted him to believe he had won. Then, one evening, Michael called a family meeting at Dad's house. That he invited our relatives and announced that he was going to take full ownership of the property. Everyone sat silently. Michael stood in the living room with a smile. Then he looked at me. "Daniel, I hope you finally accepted that this house belongs to me." I looked at him and smiled. "No." His smile disappeared. That I placed a folder on the table. "The house doesn't belong to you." Michael stared at me. Then I added, "And we have the original will, the attorney's records, and proof that the document you showed everyone was fake." The room went completely silent. Michael's face turned pale, but he still had one last thing to say. "You can't prove I did anything." I looked at him. Then I placed Dad's recorded statement on the table. "Actually, Dad already did." Michael stared at the screen, and for the first time since Dad's death, he realized his plan was falling apart. Michael stared at the video. For several seconds, nobody said a word. Then he suddenly laughed. "This proves nothing." I looked at him calmly. "It proves Dad knew exactly what you were doing." Michael's face changed. That he turned toward the family and said, "Daniel is trying to destroy me because he wants the house." But the attorney stood up. "No. Daniel isn't the one who brought the legal documents here. I am." He placed the original will on the table. Then he placed Michael's document beside it. The differences were obvious. The dates didn't match, the witnesses didn't match, and most importantly, the original document had been officially registered before Dad died. Michael started arguing. He claimed Dad had changed his mind afterward. The attorney shook his head. "There is no later legal will." Then he said something that made Michael go completely silent. "The document you presented may constitute fraud." Our relatives looked at Michael in disbelief. One of them asked, "Michael, did you actually fake Dad's will?" Michael didn't answer. He grabbed his jacket and walked toward the door, but before leaving, he turned toward me. "You planned this." I shook my head. "No. Dad planned for the truth." A few weeks later, the legal process was completed. The fake document was rejected. The house was legally handled according to Dad's actual will. It was sold, and the money was divided equally between Michael and me. But the money wasn't the part that mattered most to me. I finally understood why Dad had left that envelope. He knew that after he was gone, Michael might try to control the situation. Dad couldn't stop him from lying, but he had made sure the truth could eventually catch up with him. Michael never apologized. In fact, for months, he blamed me for everything. He told relatives that I had humiliated him. He said I had taken away his inheritance. But I never took anything from him. I only stopped him from taking what wasn't his. Then, about 6 months later, I returned to Dad's old house one final time. The house was empty, the furniture was gone, the rooms looked strangely quiet. That I walked into the backyard and sat on the old porch. That was where Dad used to drink his coffee. That I pulled out the last page of his letter. There was one sentence I hadn't noticed before. It said, "Daniel, if you're sitting here reading this, remember one thing: family isn't defined by who shares your blood. It's defined by who respects your trust." I folded the letter. For the first time since Dad died, I felt peaceful. My brother had wanted the house. That he had lied, manipulated the family, and risked everything just to control it, but in the end, he lost the one thing Dad had always wanted us to protect, our trust in each other. That I walked away from that house knowing I could never change what Michael had done, but I could choose what I did next. And I chose to let the truth speak for itself, because sometimes the strongest revenge isn't destroying someone. It's simply making sure their own lies finally catch up with them. For the next few weeks, I thought the whole situation was finally over. The house had been sold, the money had been divided, and Michael had disappeared from my life. That I honestly thought that was the end. Then one afternoon, I received a call from Dad's attorney. That he said, "Daniel, there's something else you need to know." I immediately felt nervous. That he explained that while reviewing Dad's old records, they had discovered one more document. It was a letter Dad had written several months before his death, but this letter wasn't about the house. It was about Michael. Dad had written that he had already forgiven Michael for several mistakes he had made in the past. But he also said something heartbreaking. He wrote that he couldn't keep rescuing Michael from the consequences of his own decisions. The attorney then handed me the letter. At the bottom, Dad had written, "If Michael ever tries to take what isn't his, don't destroy him. Let the truth decide his future." I sat there quietly. For the first time, I understood why Dad had never confronted Michael himself. He didn't want revenge. He wanted us to learn the truth. A few days later, Michael contacted me. His voice sounded completely different. He wasn't angry anymore. He sounded defeated. He said, "Daniel, can we talk?" We met at a small cafe. Michael looked exhausted. He finally admitted that he had forged the document. He said he was terrified that after Dad died, he would have nothing. He thought if he owned the house, his life would finally be secured. I listened without interrupting. Then he said, "I know you hate me." I looked at him and said, "I don't hate you." He looked surprised. I continued, "But I don't trust you anymore." That hurt him more than anything else I could have said. Before we left, Michael asked, "Do you think Dad would ever forgive me?" I thought about the letter. Then I said, "Dad probably would have." Michael lowered his head. "But forgiveness doesn't mean pretending nothing happened. We never became close again, maybe we never will, but I stopped carrying the anger. I realized something important. Michael thought he had won when he took control of Dad's house. Then he thought I had defeated him when the truth came out, but neither of those things were the real ending. The real ending was that Dad's final wish survived. The house was sold fairly, his truth was protected, and his family finally understood what he had been trying to teach us. Months later, I returned to the old property. The house was gone from our family, but I kept something much more valuable. Dad's handwritten letter. I framed it and placed it on my desk. Every time I read it, I remember the last lesson he left me: you don't always have to fight back, sometimes you just have to stay calm, protect the truth, and let the person who lied eventually expose themselves. My brother wanted revenge against the past. He wanted the house. He wanted control, but in the end, the truth took everything he thought he had secured, and I didn't win the house. I didn't win the money. I won something far more important. I walked away without becoming the person my brother had become, and that was the final revenge. Not destroying him, just refusing to let his lies destroy me. I played my father's recording again. His voice was calm, but I could hear the fear in it. The property is not what they're really after. I looked at my husband. What does that mean? He didn't answer. Dad continued, "Years ago, I discovered that my business partner was hiding money through the company. My heart started racing. Dad had collected evidence against him, bank records, contracts, secret transactions. Everything was stored in one hidden location." Then Dad said, "If anything happens to me, the evidence will protect my daughter." The recording suddenly stopped. My husband looked at me. "I know where the evidence is." Before I could ask how, someone knocked on the door. 3 times. We froze. My phone buzzed. A message from the man outside. "Give me the USB, and nobody gets hurt. My husband whispered, "Don't give it to him." Then my mother called, she said, "The evidence isn't in the house. Your father hid it somewhere only you would remember." I suddenly remembered my childhood. Every birthday, Dad took me to the same place, an old storage room behind his company. I knew exactly where we had to go, but as we left through the back door, I noticed something terrifying. The black car was no longer outside, they were already following us. I finally knew where my father's evidence was hidden, but someone else knew too. We reached my father's old storage room before anyone else. Inside, I found the box I remembered from childhood. My hands were shaking as I opened it. There were bank records, contracts, and one final recording that it proved that my father's former business partner had been secretly moving money through the company for years, but the biggest shock was a message my father had left for me. "I knew they would eventually use someone you love to reach you." I looked at my husband. He lowered his head. He had betrayed me, but he had also helped expose the people behind the plan. The police arrived with my lawyer. The evidence was enough to begin the investigation. My father's former business partner was arrested, and the fraudulent property documents were stopped. My husband and I ended our marriage. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I finally understood that trust can't survive on lies. My sister apologized. My mother admitted she had been secretly protecting my father's company, and the property remained mine. Months later, I returned to my father's office. I opened his final letter. It said, "Never let someone else's betrayal convince you that you're not worth trusting." I finally understood. My husband thought he was using me. My father's business partner thought he could take everything. They all believed I was too trusting to discover the truth. They were wrong. Their biggest mistake wasn't betraying me. It was underestimating me. The end. I listened to the recording again. There was no doubt that it was Emily's voice. The DNA report is fake. "He'll believe anything if I tell him she cheated." My entire body went cold, but the recording continued. "Once he leaves her, she'll have nobody. Then we can get the child under our control." I looked at my husband. "You heard this before you came here?" He nodded, "Yes. And there's more." He played another recording. This time, Emily was speaking to Daniel. She was laughing. He actually believed the photograph. "I can't believe how easy it was." I felt tears running down my face. For 12 years, I had blamed myself. I had wondered what I had done wrong. I had raised my daughter believing her father simply didn't want us, but now I knew the truth, that he had been manipulated. I turned toward my husband. "Why didn't you come back when you discovered the truth?" His eyes filled with tears, "Because by the time I discovered it, I was already too late." Then he told me something that I never expected. Daniel was still free, and he knew exactly where my daughter lived. I immediately ran toward her room, but when I opened the door, she was gone. I listened to the recording again. There was no doubt that it was Emily's voice. The DNA report is fake. "He'll believe anything if I tell him she cheated." My entire body went cold, but the recording continued. "Once he leaves her, she'll have nobody. Then we can get the child under our control." I looked at my husband. "You heard this before you came here?" He nodded, "Yes. And there's more." He played another recording. This time, Emily was speaking to Daniel. She was laughing. He actually believed the photograph. "I can't believe how easy it was." I felt tears running down my face. For 12 years, I had blamed myself. I had wondered what I had done wrong. I had raised my daughter believing her father simply didn't want us, but now I knew the truth, that he had been manipulated. I turned toward my husband. "Why didn't you come back when you discovered the truth?" His eyes filled with tears, "Because by the time I discovered it, I was already too late." Then he told me something that I never expected. Daniel was still free, and he knew exactly where my daughter lived. I immediately ran toward her room, but when I opened the door, she was gone. I ran through the house calling my daughter's name, Emma. No answer. Her bed was empty, the window was open. My heart started pounding. Then I noticed something on her pillow. A small white envelope. My husband picked it up and opened it. Inside was a photograph of Daniel. On the back, there were 6 words: "You should have stayed away." I could barely breathe. My husband immediately called the police, but before anyone could arrive, my phone rang. I answered. Nobody spoke. Then I heard my daughter's frightened voice, "Mom, I'm okay." I started crying. "Where are you? Who is with you?" There was a long silence. then she whispered, "I'm with Aunt Emily." My blood ran cold. Emily came onto the phone. "Don't worry. She's safe," I screamed. "What do you want?" Emily laughed softly, "The truth. I want what should have belonged to my family 12 years ago. My husband grabbed the phone from my hand. "If you hurt her, I'll make sure everyone knows what you did." Emily went silent, then she said, "You won't have to. Because tomorrow morning, the whole world is going to know." The call ended. My husband looked at me. For 12 years, we had both been fighting the wrong person. Now we finally knew who was behind everything, and this time, we were going to fight back. I looked at my husband and wiped the tears from my face. "We're bringing our daughter home tonight." He nodded, but instead of calling the police immediately, he showed me something on his phone. It was a recording from Daniel. He had been watching Emily the entire time. Daniel had sent her a message, "Bring the girl to the old warehouse. I want the documents before midnight." My husband looked at me. "That's our chance." The documents Daniel wanted were the same documents that could prove everything: Emily's fake DNA report, the money transfers, and the original recordings that we contacted the authorities and secretly followed Emily. When she arrived at the warehouse, my daughter was sitting inside, frightened but unharmed. Emily handed Daniel a folder. She didn't know we were listening. Then Daniel opened the folder and smiled. "After tonight, nobody can touch us." My husband stepped out of the shadows. "You're wrong." Daniel froze. Emily turned around, and when she saw me standing there, she realized her biggest mistake. She had left behind the one thing that could destroy her, the original recording. The police entered the warehouse. Daniel tried to run. Emily started crying and begging for forgiveness, but I didn't say a word. I ran straight to my daughter. I held her tightly and whispered, "Mommy's here. You're safe now." And for the first time in 12 years, our family finally knew the truth. That night, after everything was over, I sat beside my daughter while she slept. For 12 years, I had imagined the day her father would finally come back, but I never imagined he would return with tears in his eyes, carrying 12 years of regret. My husband stood at the doorway. "Can I come in?" he asked. I nodded. He walked inside and looked at our daughter. Tears rolled down his face. "I missed everything," he whispered. "Her first word. Her first day of school. Every birthday." I looked at him. "You did." He lowered his head. "I know I can't get those years back. And I don't expect you to forgive me just because I finally told you the truth." For the first time, I saw something different in his eyes, not excuses, not pride, regret. I told him, "I don't know if I can ever love you the way I once did." He nodded. "I understand." Then I added, "But if you truly want to be her father, you can start by earning her trust." He looked at our daughter and smiled through his tears. He didn't ask me to take him back. He didn't ask for another chance at our marriage. He simply said, "I'll spend the rest of my life proving that I deserve to be in her life." And that was when I realized something. Sometimes revenge isn't watching someone suffer. Sometimes revenge is surviving, becoming stronger, and refusing to let what they did destroy the person you become. 12 years ago, he walked away from his pregnant wife. 12 years later, he came back begging for forgiveness, but this time, I was the one who decided what happened next. My heart stopped. A second message arrived. "Look inside Daniel's box." I turned toward the box on the table. My hand started shaking. I opened it again. At the very bottom was a sealed envelope. My name was written across it. I looked at Daniel. "What's this?" His face changed. "I've never seen that before." I slowly opened the envelope. Inside was a single photograph that it showed me leaving the hospital 3 years ago, but there was something terrifying in the background. A woman was standing behind me, watching, and Daniel whispered, "That woman was supposed to be dead." I stared at the photograph. The woman standing behind me looked familiar. But I couldn't remember where I had seen her. "Who is she?" I asked. Daniel took the photograph from my hand. His face became pale. "She worked for my mother." "Why did you say she was dead?" "Because 3 years ago, she was involved in the hospital incident." I felt a chill. "What happened?" Daniel sat down. "She disappeared after that night. We were told she had died in a car accident." I looked at the photograph again. "Then who took this picture?" "I don't know." Suddenly, someone knocked on the front door. 3 slow knocks. Daniel immediately stood up. "Stay with Emma." He walked toward the door. I followed him. He looked through the window. Nobody was outside, then he noticed an envelope lying on the doorstep that he picked it up. My name was written on it. Inside was another photograph. This one showed the woman entering a hotel. On the back were 3 words, "She is alive." My heart started racing. Daniel looked at me. "We need to find her before she finds us." That night, we searched through every old document Daniel had saved. Finally, we found something. A hotel receipt. The date was 3 years ago, the same week he left me. Daniel stared at it. "I remember this hotel." "Why?" "Because I met someone there." "Who?" He hesitated, then he said, "The woman in the photograph." I felt betrayed all over again. "You knew her?" "I knew her before you did." "What was she doing there?" Daniel shook his head. "I don't know." Before we could continue, the lights suddenly went out. Emma screamed. I grabbed her. Daniel ran toward the hallway, then we heard glass breaking downstairs. Someone had entered the house. Daniel whispered, "Stay here." Footsteps moved slowly across the floor, then a woman's voice came from downstairs. "Daniel." He froze. The voice continued, "You really thought I was dead?" I looked at Daniel. His face had lost all color. The woman laughed softly. "It's time you finally told her the truth." And then the lights came back on. A woman was standing at the bottom of the stairs, the same woman from the photograph. She looked directly at me. And smiled. I stood frozen at the top of the stairs. The woman looked directly at me. Daniel whispered her name, "Victoria." She smiled. "You still remember me?" I held Emma closer. "What do you want?" Victoria slowly walked into the room. "I didn't come here to hurt you." "Then why are you here?" "To tell you the truth." Daniel stepped between us. "You should have stayed away." Victoria laughed. "You still think you can protect her?" She looked at me. "Your husband didn't leave you because he stopped loving you." "I already know that." "No," she said. "You don't know the whole truth." Daniel's face changed. I turned toward him. "What isn't he telling me?" Victoria placed an envelope on the table. "Open it." I picked it up. Inside were several documents. The first was a hospital report from the night Emma was born. The second was a photograph of Daniel's mother, but the third document made my hands shake. It was a contract. My name was written on it. "What is this?" Victoria looked at Daniel. "He signed it 3 years ago." I stared at him. "You signed something?" Daniel lowered his head. "I had no choice." "What did you sign?" Victoria answered for him. "He agreed to disappear from your life in exchange for keeping you and Emma alive." My heart broke all over again. Daniel looked at me. I thought it was the only way. I couldn't speak. For 3 years, I had hated him for leaving. Now I was discovering that he had sacrificed his entire life to protect us, but Victoria wasn't finished. There was one condition he didn't know about. Daniel looked up. "What condition?" Victoria's expression became serious. "They never intended to let you and Emma live peacefully." She pointed toward the documents. "The contract was only the beginning." I looked at the final page. There was a signature at the bottom, not Daniel's, not his mother's. Someone else's. I recognized the name. My blood ran cold. It belonged to the person I trusted most after Daniel left. My former business manager, Rachel. I looked at Victoria. "Why would Rachel sign this?" Victoria whispered, "Because Rachel wasn't protecting you. She was working for them." And suddenly, I realized the betrayal was much bigger than I had ever imagined. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Rachel signed this?" Victoria nodded. "She was working for them from the beginning." I remembered how Rachel had helped me after Daniel left. She had comforted me, she had helped me grow my business, she had even visited Emma. All those memories suddenly felt like lies. Daniel looked at the documents. "We need to find her." My phone rang. It was Rachel. I answered. "Why did you sign that contract?" There was silence, then she whispered, "Because I was scared." "Scared of what?" "My family was being threatened." I felt angry. "You could have told me." "I tried." "No, Rachel. You watched my daughter for them." She started crying. "I never wanted Emma hurt." "Then where are you?" "I can't tell you." Victoria stepped closer. "Rachel, they're coming for you too." Rachel went silent, then she whispered, "They know I betrayed them." The call suddenly ended. Daniel looked at me. We have to find her before they do. We tracked the last location from the phone that IT led to an abandoned office building. When we arrived, the place was empty. But Rachel had left something behind. A small USB drive. Daniel connected it to his laptop. A video appeared. Rachel was sitting in front of the camera. If you're watching this, I'm probably already in danger. She took a deep breath. I need you to know the truth. The video continued. Daniel's mother wasn't the person controlling everything. I looked at Daniel. Rachel continued, there is someone above her. My heart started pounding. He has been controlling Daniel's business, his mother, and everyone around you. Daniel whispered, who? Rachel looked directly into the camera, then she said a name. My blood ran cold. It was the name of the man who had been my biggest business investor, the man who had helped me build my company after Daniel left, the man I trusted completely. I stared at the screen. He was never helping me, I whispered. Rachel's video ended with one final warning, don't trust anyone. Then Daniel's phone buzzed. A message appeared, you finally know who I am. A second message followed. Now come to my office. I looked at Daniel. This time, we weren't running. We were going to confront him. The next morning, Daniel and I drove to the office of the man who had invested in my company. For 3 years, I had trusted him. He had helped me when I was alone. He had supported my business. And now I was discovering that it had all been part of a plan. When we entered his office, he was waiting for us. He smiled calmly. I knew you would come. I looked at him. Why? Why what? Why destroy our lives? He stood up and walked toward the window. Because Daniel refused to give me what I wanted. Daniel stepped forward. My company. The man smiled. Not just your company. He turned toward me. I wanted everything. I felt anger rise inside me. You threatened my family. You were never the target, he said. Daniel was. Daniel clenched his fists. And Emma? The man's expression became cold. She was leverage. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. 3 years of pain. 3 years of fear, all because of greed. Then the man opened a drawer. He placed a folder on the table. Take it. I looked inside. Bank records, contracts, messages. Evidence against everyone involved. Why are you giving us this? He smiled. Because I lost. Daniel frowned. What do you mean? The man looked at me. You became stronger than I expected. Before anyone could speak, police officers entered the office. Victoria had already sent them all the evidence. The man laughed quietly as officers placed him in handcuffs. This isn't over, he said, but I knew he was wrong. For the first time in years, the people who destroyed our family were finally facing justice. As the police took him away, Daniel looked at me. It's over. I looked at Emma's photograph in my phone. For the first time in 3 years, I believed him, but there was still one question left. I turned toward Daniel. Now that everything is over, what happens to us? Daniel looked at me silently, because the hardest part of our story had just begun. Could I forgive the man who left me? For the first time in 3 years, there was no one chasing us. No threats. No hidden cameras. No strange messages, just silence. But that silence made me think about Daniel. He was sitting outside on the porch, looking at the street. I walked toward him. You're leaving? He shook his head. Only if you want me to. I sat beside him. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then I asked, why didn't you come back when the danger was gone? He looked down. Because I thought you hated me. I did. He nodded. I deserved that. I looked at him. You missed everything. I know. Emma's first steps. His eyes filled with tears. Her first birthday. I know. Her first day of school. He couldn't speak. I looked away. I spent 3 years raising her alone. I know. Then he said something I never expected. I don't want forgiveness because I deserve it. I looked at him. I want forgiveness because I want to spend the rest of my life earning your trust. My heart softened, but I wasn't ready to forget. I can't promise things will go back to the way they were. I don't want the old life back. He looked toward the house. I want to build a new one. At that moment, Emma opened the door. Mommy? Yes, sweetheart. Can Daddy stay for dinner? I looked at Daniel. He smiled. If your mother says yes. I looked at Emma's hopeful face, then I nodded. Yes. That simple word made Daniel's eyes fill with tears. That evening, we sat together at the dinner table. That it wasn't perfect, that it wasn't the family we had once imagined, but it was a beginning. Later that night, after Emma fell asleep, Daniel came to me. Thank you. I shook my head. Don't thank me yet. He smiled. Why? Because forgiveness isn't a gift. I looked into his eyes. It's something you have to earn. He nodded. That I will. For the first time, I believed him. But I didn't know that the next morning, one final envelope would arrive at my door, and inside it would be something that could change everything again. The next morning, someone knocked on my door. That I opened it and found an envelope on the floor. There was no name. I picked it up and opened it carefully. Inside was a photograph that it showed Daniel standing outside the hospital 3 years ago, the night he left me, but on the back, there was a handwritten message. He wasn't the only one who sacrificed everything. I looked at Daniel. He stared at the photograph in silence. Who took this? He slowly shook his head. I don't know. Then I noticed something else inside the envelope. A letter. It explained that Daniel had secretly transferred most of his personal savings into an account for Emma before leaving. He had never used the money. He had never told me. I looked at him. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't want you to think I left for money. I couldn't speak. For 3 years, I had believed he walked away without caring, but he had been carrying his own pain all those years. I looked at Emma sleeping peacefully in the next room, then I realized something. Revenge had never really been about destroying Daniel or the people who hurt me. Real revenge was surviving. I had raised my daughter, built my business, created a home. The next morning, someone knocked on my door. I opened it and found an envelope on the floor. There was no name. I picked it up and opened it carefully. Inside was a photograph that it showed Daniel standing outside the hospital 3 years ago, the night he left me, but on the back, there was a handwritten message. He wasn't the only one who sacrificed everything. I looked at Daniel. He stared at the photograph in silence. Who took this? He slowly shook his head. I don't know. Then I noticed something else inside the envelope. A letter. It explained that Daniel had secretly transferred most of his personal savings into an account for Emma before leaving. He had never used the money. He had never told me. I looked at him. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't want you to think I left for money. I couldn't speak. For 3 years, I had believed he walked away without caring, but he had been carrying his own pain all those years. I looked at Emma sleeping peacefully in the next room, then I realized something. Revenge had never really been about destroying Daniel or the people who hurt me. Real revenge was surviving. I had raised my daughter, built my business, created a home. And became stronger than the woman who had once cried on the floor after her husband walked away. I turned toward Daniel. I forgive you. His eyes filled with tears. But forgiveness doesn't erase the past. I know. It means we stop letting the past control our future. He nodded. Then Emma ran into the room. Mommy. Daddy. Daniel smiled. I looked at them both. For the first time, I didn't feel like the woman who had been abandoned. I felt like the woman who had survived. The woman who had rebuilt everything. The woman who had chosen her own happiness. Daniel once thought leaving me was the easiest way to escape his problems. Instead, he lost 3 years with his daughter and almost lost the woman he loved forever. And me, I didn't get revenge by destroying him. I got revenge by becoming someone he could never abandon again. Sometimes the best revenge isn't making someone suffer. It's building a life so beautiful that you no longer need revenge at all. And that was the day I finally closed the door on the past, and opened it to our future.